Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, this is Sam Rice. I've been a fan of Sam Rice's for years because I rely on her books like there's no tomorrow. But many of you will know Sam from all the coverage that Sam just had in Telegraph magazine, Telegraph newspaper, with the creator of the healthiest pancakes in the world. What's not to like about that, Sam?
I know it's a good one, isn't it? It's quite a claim. It is quite a claim. I realise that.
Yeah, so, and everyone can be eating those. We've just had your carrot cake porridge this morning, which sounds completely naughty, but is totally gorgeous and really good for you. So
fantastic. Well, I'm glad you're cooking from the book. That is music to my ears, so thanks for that.
Both books, look, they've got
fantastic. Oh, well, look, we can twin.
I actually give myself permission in your books to writing them, and what I love about Sam's books, everyone, is they have like lovely little thing here so you can see all the different elements that you're working towards for your health. And I can honestly say I've never had a bad recipe of yours. I've cooked this for years.
I'm always a bit worried when people say, yeah, I cook from your book, and you're waiting for the but fortunately there's not usually a but, and if they do have a disaster with a recipe, there's usually quite a good reason why.
That's a bad one. This comes with pictures, so you get, you can see what you're getting. This one doesn't, but because I rely on this one, I didn't need pictures in this to say, oh, I just know it's going to be good.
It's more of the same. It's basically more of the same. And the way that I put together my recipes and how I create them, and the flavors are probably going to work for you. So it's just more of the same. But we can come on to the books a bit later, and I can talk a little bit about the differences between the books, and one sort of led on from the other. So they're a bit of a natural progression, one from the other.
Yeah. Well, they're absolutely great, and I've bought these for my friends for for those who don't mind having something saying midlife. I mean, because it's a bit of a shock when you get there, isn't it? You suddenly classed in the midlife category, but anyway.
I know, but we have to be thankful that it is now being rebranded as midlife, and it's not middle-aged anymore. I think midlife is a lot more approachable a term. Actually, it's interesting, when the first book was published, there was quite a lot of debate about using midlife in the title and whether people would want to actually associate with that term.
Yeah.
And myself and Mimi, who I wrote the first book with, she and I were very strongly in favour of embracing the term and saying there's nothing wrong with midlife. That's what we are. Let's embrace it. And actually the publishers are on board with that, whereas some of the other publishers we've spoken to are like, no, we can't have that in the title. So it's interesting, isn't it?
But there's been definitely, isn't it? Like, it's things beginning with M we want to just put over there and not speak about. So so let's talk. What I love, Sam, and I've been following you on Instagram for a while once I dug into this, and I wonder if you'd share your story a bit of how your career came about, and just how you took something really painful and a tragedy into what is now helping thousands of people.
I think it's a common story. I think quite often, if you scratch the surface of these things, people are compelled to create when things happen to them, because it's almost a form of therapy to actually, it's a catalyst, isn't it? So in my personal case, it was 2012, and my brother Ben, who was 27 at the time, he sadly died from complications from type 1 diabetes. And at the time I was 42, I had 2 young children. I definitely wasn't prioritizing my own health. And it just was, obviously, it was a huge shock for our family. I mean, we knew that he wasn't very well, but we never for a minute thought that he was going to die. It came out of the blue. And actually, he quite often what happens with type 1 diabetes, which incidentally isn't the one that's actually related to lifestyle changes. It's type 1 diabetes is when you stop producing insulin. So that's the type that he had. It's an autoimmune disease, but we had just not realized the condition that he was in, because a lot of the damage is done internally. And a lot of diabetes patients actually end up with heart conditions, and we think that's what happened to him, that he ended up having a heart attack. So Yeah, that was obviously a huge wake-up call. And so up until the age of 42, I had nothing to do with health and nutrition, nothing. In fact, I would say it's probably the reverse. I would say my health and wellness is probably at the bottom of my priority list. And incidentally,
I was naturally slim.
I'm not. Interesting. I'm actually not. That's the interesting thing.
Really?
I'm not. No, I'm not. And actually, I think, you know, if you talk to all the females in my family line, we all struggle with our weight. Well, I used to struggle with my weight. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I would say back then I was a good 10 kilos overweight. Yeah, not hugely overweight, but you know, 10 kilos is a fair amount to shift. I had 2 young kids. I wasn't really finding the time to exercise. And like I said, my health was at the bottom of the priority list. And I just realized at that point that something had to change, not just purely from a health point of view, but from my own mental point of view, that I needed to do something positive, you know, in the wake of this tragic event. And I had no thought about writing books. I just wanted to sort my own health out. I mean, looking back on it, I guess I felt Ben had been robbed of his health, and I had almost a duty to him to look after mine. You know, looking back on it, it wasn't a conscious thought at the time, but I think looking back on it, that's what happened. So I just thought, right, you know, I'm going to shift this weight. I'm going to make some changes. I didn't know where to start. I had no background in nutrition. I had done a few sort of odd diets in the past. To lose weight to get married. I'd done some, you know, those meal replacement shakes. So I dipped in and out of diet culture, like I think most women of my generation probably have over the years. But it had never really got me anywhere. And I had a really negative relationship with food. I felt guilty eating everything I was eating, and I didn't know what to eat, and everything felt like it had too much fat and too much chemicals. And I just was totally confused.
That's how I feel about a lot of food, because until I got your stuff, because everything felt so confusing. It was like fat is the enemy, sugar is the enemy.
I thought I've just got to go back to basics and, you know, not buy into that toxic diet culture. I've got to really go back to the truth about food, which is that actually most foods, if you're eating predominantly food from scratch, and it doesn't have to be going to health food shops and getting obscure ingredients. It's just the stuff in your, it's usually pretty healthy. Just go back to basics. And that's pretty much what I did. I started studying nutrition. And what makes it all a bit more interesting is that actually at about the same time, about a year afterwards, so once I sort of made this mental decision that I wanted to make some changes, we decided to move. So we were living in the UK. We decided to move to Bali in Indonesia. I think we just felt like we needed a change. We were running our own business. We had been for a long time. It was all quite stressful. And we just wanted to take a year out while the kids were still young enough to do so, to go and have a family adventure for a year somewhere completely different. So we had to sort of get all our ducks in a row to make it happen. And we sold our house and all sorts of things. And we shipped off to Bali on this big adventure. And 1 year actually turned into 5 years. So we just never came back. Because what happened when I got there was I just really enjoyed the lifestyle there. It was much less stressful. I mean, forget about the weather. Of course, that was better. But taking the weather out of the equation, it was much easier to eat more healthily. There's a fantastic health food scene in Bali that really inspired me. And I started seeing actually that eating well wasn't necessarily just eating boring diet food. No. Eating well could mean eating really fantastic, delicious food. And it was just like sounds so simple when you say it, but it was a bit of a light bulb moment. Yeah. I thought, this is really talking to me. And then what happened was a friend of mine, Mimi, who I wrote the book with, she came to visit me in Bali. And we were checking out all these sort of health food places, and it's very much a wellness center, Bali. So lots of people move there because they're into yoga or they're into various healing practices, and it's that kind of a place. I mean, I'm not really that kind of person. I'm not a hugely alternative person, but I found it interesting. Yeah. And I just like to explore it and see what was going on. And the food just blew my mind, really. And Mimi and I just thought, there's something in here. This food is talking to us as midlife women. This food is talking to us, and there's something that suits our palate. It's obviously feeding our bodies in the way that they need to be fed.
Yeah.
And we really felt there was something in that midlife nutrition idea. And I actually came up with the title for the Midlife Kitchen in the middle of a yoga class, which sounds like a huge cliche, but it just kind of came to me, and it was the Midlife Kitchen, this is what we should do. And initially we just thought maybe we'd just do it as a blog and start talking about midlife nutrition and doing research and looking at which ingredients are good for you. But actually pretty quickly, once we'd pitched the idea to a few publishers, it very quickly became the book, because I think they could see it was a niche that, you know, on the cookbook shelves, there wasn't really anything like it. And so I think they could see that we were onto something, and that it was a market that wasn't being catered for, because midlife women, I mean, we're talking, this is 2016. So even as recently as 2016, midlife, and it's not just midlife women, I mean, we're two midlife women, but midlifers in general, you know, men struggle with their weight in midlife. So it's not just women, you know, men's hormones are changing and their metabolisms are slowing as well. So it's not just women at all. And we just felt that this wasn't really a discussion that was happening. But now, you know, sort of 4 or 5 years later, it's very mainstream. You know, a lot of the big publications and newspapers back in the UK have really picked up the ball and run with it, this whole idea of midlife health. So I feel that we were kind of at the start of it, which is really, you know, it's really, I feel quite proud of the fact that we were there right at the beginning of it. So that was the Midlife Kitchen, and that is the book that that's this one it's a full color cookbook. So it's all about midlife nutrition, not about weight loss. It's just about eating well in midlife and what kind of ingredients work well. So we basically researched all those really nutrient dense ingredients and put them into recipes that we hope people would like to make. So that was the concept of the first book. And then the second book came out of that, because although I was speaking to a lot of midlifers that felt that they were eating quite healthily and they felt they were doing the right things, in inverted commas, but they were still starting to put on weight in midlife. And when I say midlife, roughly 40 onwards, but obviously it varies from person to person. And so I thought, okay, something else is going on here. I want to research why this weight gain is happening. Obviously, it's things like hormones and, sorry?
Yeah, so it's hormones.
Well, obviously, I mean, that's the one that springs to mind, isn't it? Like your hormones are changing. Interestingly, it's kind of portion sizes in reverse, because what happens is your energy requirements as you age get less. So if you stick with the same portion sizes, you will put weight on. You've actually, do you see what I mean? Because your actual energy requirement is less. So if you just carry on eating the way you've always ate and do nothing differently, you will put on weight, because you don't need that much food. So you actually, and statistically, you need about 20% less energy when you're 50 than when you're, say, 20, if everything else remains the same. Obviously, if you increase your activity levels and stuff, that all has an impact. But there's an interesting concept, this idea that, you know, I haven't changed anything, but I'm putting on weight. Yeah, because you need to change things.
I guess in midlife, because in our house, I'm feeding two teenage boys and a 6'5" husband, and you serve up the food. And so it's being mindful of serving up that portion that's a little bit less, isn't it, at this time of life?
Yeah, it is. And one of the things I do talk about is this idea of volume control, and just try eating 20% less across the board. That's a really good thing, you know, and you actually will be surprised that you will be satisfied with less food. You can certainly retrain yourself to expect less food. So that's just a really good strategy, rather than just loading up your plate like you would always have, which is just habitual. Just think, actually, just going to take it down a notch, and you'd be surprised how a simple tweak like that can have actually quite a big impact.
And what I love about your feed, Sam, is because you have that blend of, you know, European and Asian and herbs and spices, you know, it's not uncommon to find spices in with dill almost, you know, it's a beautiful blend. So even when with this book, you don't feel like you're eating something that's meant to make you lose weight. And what I love about your food also, so it's really beautiful in nutrition, in flavour, but also because I do have a family with 2 teenage boys, I'm not cooking different food for all of us. You know, if I have I mean, say at lunch, your tuna topper, I can have some with some yogurt and they can have some with some mayonnaise. You know, it's as simple as that. Of an evening, I might choose to not have the naan breads or the rice that they're having. I might just have the vegetable tagine or whatever. So it's like your recipes are different components and you can choose 2 of the 3 of them, say, if it's for me, and they'll have 3 of the 3, or, you know, it.
Yes. Well, it was really important for me to do that, because obviously I talk to a lot of midlife women because of the books, and I listen to what their challenges are. I mean, I say women because they're usually the ones that cook. But my book does apply to men as well. I do talk about the changes men go through in midlife as well.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I'm talking to midlife women, and they all say, you know, one of the biggest barriers is that they have to cook for the family, and most diets mean that they have to eat something completely different. And I don't like that idea of mum sat in the corner eating something weird that the rest of the family aren't eating. It's not a good example to set, and B, it's not really sustainable, because you're not gonna do that forever. So I really, particularly the dinner recipes in the book, I really wanted them to be family friendly, or at least tweakable, so that you can, like you say, I give ideas, I call them tips and tweaks. So
yes, you do.
Additional things you can add. So if you're feeding the family, why not serve this with, you know, some Hasselback potatoes or something like that. But if you're in weight loss mode, maybe that won't fit within what you're supposed to be eating for that day. So just to give a little bit of background here, the sort of calorie deficit is achieved in the midlife method by having a few days a week where you focus on calorie restriction. And it's not really calorie counting, it's more being calorie aware. So you try on a few days a week to just eat a bit less, which is what we were talking about before. It's not every day, it's just a few days a week where you try and stick to a lower calorie intake, but you're still eating 3 normal meals a day. And those days where you're trying to eat a little bit less are called light days. So you might say, okay, this week I'm going to do 3 light days. I'm going to do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Those fit with my schedule. And on those days, I'm going to just have my 3 meals from the book. That's going to add up to 800 calories. And I'm not going to have any snacks or alcohol on those days. Okay, so it's a little bit, some fasting regimes do something similar. So there have been diets like the Fast 2 and all these kind of things. But the problem with those diets is quite often there are time windows that you have to eat in that are really difficult. Like, you know, some say you only have to eat within 12 o'clock and 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock and 4. I mean, no one can really live like that. And also, I think fasting, where you have to have fasting windows, you just get super hungry. And then you're more likely to it's more likely to sabotage things, because you get so hungry, you just like flip out and then go and
you just
to
grab
Starbucks,
anything.
have a massive muffin.
Yeah.
So I'm not really a big believer in meals. I am a believer in listening to your appetite and eating intuitively and eating with awareness. But just skipping meals for skipping meals' sake doesn't seem to me a very sustainable thing to do. I do appreciate that there are some health benefits that have been shown to be associated with fasting. But I think fasting is a different concept to just a healthy, sustainable weight loss program, which is what I'm trying to do. So there's slightly different objectives, I think.
At this point, we should say, to our congregation, it's not that we're here promoting diets for promoting diets' sake. You know, we're responding to, you know, many people within my own circle have said, they call the quarantine 15. They put on 15 pounds in quarantine. And it's a response to that, to say, how do you, if you're struggling with how you feel about yourself within lockdown, because you feel like you've put on a little bit of weight, this is a really great option to go down, and it's really straightforward.
And it's very sustainable, and it's healthy, and it's not, there are different ways you can use it, but you can just use it like a cookbook. Forget about calories, forget about anything like that. Just start cooking some of the recipes from the book. They're naturally lower calorie anyway, so you don't really have to think about it. They're macro balanced, they're healthy, and they're going to be delicious. So that's one way you can use the book.
And then
entry level.
If people just want to say, do you know what? I've been drinking an extra glass of wine because it felt like a holiday at the start of lockdown. Lockdown 1 especially just felt like a 3-week holiday, didn't it, initially? I've been drinking. I've realised that I am grabbing food. I don't think I'm making a good impression on my children for their eating habits. And by us cooking healthy food, then we are educating our children to accept more healthy food. And when I say that, my teenagers do like, you know, anything that's orange and beige.
My kids are the pickiest in the world, so I'm not going to claim I've cracked that one, but they will eat enough healthy things that I make them. And actually the recipes that I've created are ones that my kids will actually, for the most part, are ones that my kids will actually eat. So there's nothing that's going to scare the horses, you know, it's all sort of quite easy stuff. But yeah, I mean, going back to that, it's not just, you know, let's move on from just the weight loss thing. I think midlife health is, you know, it's got to be holistic. So you've not just got to look at what you're eating, but you do have to think about exercise. You do have to think about sleep. You do have to think about stress. You do have to think about alcohol. They all come into it. And so I do cover that in this book. It's not called the midlife diet. It's called the midlife method because it's a process of lifestyle changes that you can do in a very gentle way to just slowly move towards a more sustainable, healthy lifestyle. And it doesn't mean cutting out alcohol. It doesn't mean doing anything that you don't want to do, but it does mean just focusing on those things and getting them to a place where they're not going to be negatively impacting your health. So things like exercise, I mean, everybody has had probably quite a different experience of exercise in lockdown, because some people have gone gangbusters on exercise. Some people haven't felt motivated to exercise. So I think it's had quite a strange impact on you know, this sort of polarization really of those that do and those that don't. And really it's to refocus and say, right, what is an optimum way to exercise? As you get a little bit older, and these are all habits that you can start at any age. I mean, the reason I keep saying midlife is because I'm midlife and I came to it in midlife. Yes. But I wish I'd come to it earlier. I wish I'd been thinking about these things when I was in my 20s and 30s.
What would you do?
I wasn't.
What shifts would you have made in hindsight? Because we've got a young adult, you know, congregation and staff, and very young parents, you know, or of parents of young children. And I'm the same, you know, I picked up your book when I was in my mid-40s. I'm going to be 50 in a few weeks. And you think, oh man, I wish I'd have eaten like this a bit more when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Yes, I mean, it basically took me to be 42 in a big tragedy to actually decide to do something about it. And I regret that, because I had quite a few wasted years of feeling not particularly healthy, not particularly well, and really, I think the main advice I would give to my younger self is make it more of a priority. Yeah. It's not self-indulgent or wrong to look after yourself. I think we have this idea that it's something that has to be done as quickly as possible so that you can get on with more important things. Whereas actually it's the complete opposite of that. You know, there's nothing more important than your health. Absolutely nothing more important than your health in terms of your quality of life. And actually, if we could just say to ourselves, you know, I go back to myself in my 20s, it was just grabbing food left, right and centre, and, you know, maybe fitting in the odd, what was I doing back then? Probably a step class once a week or something, I don't know. And I was just sort of going through the motions of it. Whereas I think if I had an understanding of how important it was and I'd prioritize it a bit more, and I sort of said, actually, it's okay to spend a bit of time planning my meals and getting the ingredients and preparing the food and actually enjoying the food, taking time to, you know, give yourself that permission to have that time to do it. And I never did that. It was all just a tick box exercise, just got to get out there, got to get out there. And I had kids. And that's such a shame, because I look back now on how I fed my children when they were small, and I missed quite a big trick there, because I didn't know much about nutrition. I hadn't gone through this process of education, and if someone had told me then that I'd be writing books where I'm actually creating recipes, I would not have believed them, because I was, you know, fish fingers and peas, or, you know, I was just feeding my kids how I thought you fed kids.
Yes, that kid food that, you know, I mean, you know, when we had like little groups and stuff, you know, there were fish fingers and stuff. I had some Annabelle caramel, you know, how you puree things and stuff. Yeah. Oh, my goodness me. But
now I'm not saying, I mean, some kids are just fussy, and despite your best endeavors of giving them, I mean, we've lived in many, many different places, and my kids have been exposed to all sorts of foods. but they've still ended up being quite fussy. So I'm not saying that everyone's going to have success with this method, but I wish I'd known then what I know now, and I might have tried to do things a bit differently just to give them more of an appreciation. I mean, it's all come really in their teenage years, and they're so sick of me banging on about healthy food now. It's sort of, they've had it all concertinaed into the last sort of 5 years.
But they will know what feels good, because it was something that you mentioned earlier, Sam. You said you felt a bit, you know, rubbish at times in like your 20s and 30s. And what has really struck me is that whole gut health, mental health association. And, you know, my friend Katya and Naomi, who are other pre-records, were talking about the vagus nerve and how your brain feeds all of your, you know, organs and stuff and connects to your gut. And if your gut health isn't well, then your mental health is going to be challenged as well. And so I think that's a real encouragement to, if anyone is challenged with their mental health, especially at this time when we've been locked up for a year, to have a look.
It's one of the best things you can do for yourself, and so you don't feel guilty about prioritizing it. We all manage to find time to scroll on Instagram, don't we? Well, most of us do. I'm sure there are some people out there who really don't, but most of the people I know can find half an hour to Instagram, and that's all I do. In terms of exercise, I just roll out a mat and do an online thing for half an hour with my hand weights. You know, I'm not going off running marathons and things like that. You know, it's just building it, actually saying to yourself, it's okay to take time and do this. And that piece about gut health, that's really quite recent research about the gut. I think it's called the gut-brain axis. And so this is stuff that's evolving all the time. And I think all the evidence is just mounting and mounting and mounting that you are what you eat. And we always used to say it, but I think the evidence is building that there's that, you know, it's the one thing that you can really do for yourself. And you have to eat 3 meals a day. They might as well be good, nutritious meals.
Yes. And it's well, you can't have an odd bit of, you know, I love my dark chocolate, Lindt sea salt dark chocolate.
I have that one.
What's so not to like about that? But it's about, you know, having it in balance, isn't it?
It's that age-old thing, you know, it's there's nothing new under the sun. It's just everything in moderation. And it's not very fashionable to take that approach, but it is the only approach that really works and is sustainable long term. You know, if you're making, if you're eating well and you're eating nutrient dense food 80-90% of the time, then you can really have whatever you want. I mean, one of my other the previous lives, I was a wine buyer and a wine writer, so I absolutely love wine, and I could never give that up. But I have to find a way of incorporating it into my life such that it doesn't impact my health. So I have to put certain limits on it. Otherwise, it becomes a source of guilt and I feel bad for drinking it. Whereas if I can keep to the certain limits, which are the healthy drinking guidelines, 14 units a week, 3 drink-free days a week, don't have more than 6 units in one sitting. As long as I'm sticking to those, I can still enjoy it. I can still have it. And I think if you apply that mentality across everything, then it seems more doable. It seems more achievable, rather than saying you can't eat carbs or you can't drink or you can't. It's just too restrictive.
It is. And you talk about responsible drinking in your, you write for a magazine, don't you? So people can access that through. Do you want to tell them a little bit about where they can find you about that?
Yes. So I have a monthly column in Top Santé magazine, and I write about midlife food and health there. And one of my sets of columns in there was about healthy drinking, because I think people get very confused about, is red wine good for you? Is it not good for you? And and actually, one of the main problems with drinking alcohol is the sugar that people consume along with their alcohol, and a lot of people don't really think about that. Like, you wouldn't really think of, that drinking a Coke isn't the healthiest thing, but then you'll go and have a spirit with a load of mixer, and you don't really equate the two things. So I think people are, it's just sort of trying to make sure that if you are drinking, you're doing it in a healthy way, you're staying hydrated. So it's all kind of tips like that. So I very much do, I do talk about alcohol in the midlife method, because I think it can be a lot of people's Achilles heel when it comes to being healthy. You know, they might be exercising quite a lot, they might be really into the healthy eating, but they just can't quite get a handle on the alcohol side of things. So it is worth a bit of focus.
Sure. What else was I absolutely loved on your Instagram, your quarantine diaries of the hotel room.
Oh yes, I'm getting a flashback. I think I might have PTSD.
Because you were back in the UK to do some business stuff, weren't you? And then went back to, because we're recording whilst you're in Singapore right now.
Yes.
And you went back via Dubai?
I did. It was a whole great big saga because so my husband had to go back to the UK for work, and then my son's 19 and he's at university in London, and he had a bad knee injury. And then my husband was a bit unwell as well. And I thought, my goodness, I'm just going to have to go back to the UK and try and sort them out. Plus my book was being launched. The Midlife Method came out on December the 31st. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go to the UK and try and sort all this out. Went back just as the UK was really going back into lockdown. So it wasn't the best timing in the world. And then, but I've got a daughter who's 13, who's at school here in Singapore. So had to get back. Anyway, what happened was, unfortunately, because of the new variant, Singapore stopped flights from the UK. So we had approval to come back to Singapore, but then they cancelled that and said you can't come back. So then it was a whole convoluted story, but in a nutshell, to cut a long story short, we ended up in hotel quarantine in Singapore via Dubai. And what they do in Singapore is a much stricter version of what the UK is attempting to do with hotel quarantine. It's super strict here. I mean, it's literally like
separated from your family, didn't you? Because you were in one hotel, and then someone who you'd come into contact with.
It was the bizarrest thing.
Positive, and then you were shipped off to another hotel on your own.
So basically what happened was, as we were coming through the airport in Singapore, I had downloaded this app that you have to have in Singapore called Trace Together. It's like a contact tracing app. And I had that live on my phone. But my daughter and my husband didn't have it. It wasn't on their phone. They hadn't downloaded it because my husband had been away. And so he hadn't. And my daughter's, she's a kid, so she hadn't bothered to do it. So although we were all together, it was only me that it picked up had been in the vicinity of someone who had subsequently tested positive for COVID. So we all got to our quarantine hotel, we were all settled in, 2 weeks, kind of got organized, got our heads around it. And then on the second day, I got a call from authorities in Singapore saying, you've been in contact with somebody who's got COVID. So now we have to put you under a quarantine order. And then you get put in a different hotel. They have quarantine hotels for people who may have come into contact with people with COVID. So that was quite difficult. It was quite difficult for my daughter, obviously, these men in PPE carting me off and sort of waving at the door. So that was a bit stressful for her. Yeah. And I was put in this absolutely tiny room. It was quite difficult mentally to cope with the shit. It was literally a bed with about a meter around it. And that's where I served out the rest of my 14 days. So it wasn't ideal. Fortunately, I am quite good in my own company. And I had spent a long time with my family in the run up. So maybe we all slightly needed a break from each other. But it was quite challenging because, I mean, I don't know if you saw on my Instagram stories, but I was posting pictures of the food that was being provided.
Yes, and it was speak about that.
Pretty difficult for someone who is so into healthy eating. Yeah, this was the absolute opposite. And actually it was an interesting realization for me how far I've actually come in terms of changing what I eat, because this food was arriving. I was like, I just cannot eat that.
It was fried and brown, and some of the
time it was very
carb
heavy.
I think that this is a dumpling. It might have some pork in it, but it's looking like that might be veg. And then you said, no, I can't eat it. And thankfully, because what it made me, after that, my husband was then in hospital for almost 2 weeks, and his food was very similar, but he was like a 3-hour round trip away from us. So we weren't allowed to go in and see him. We did get him some food parcels delivered, but what it really made me realize was that you had some deliveries, didn't you? Your deliveries, and some of your lovely friends had delivered.
I had lots of friends, thank goodness. I've got quite a lot of foodie friends here, and they were delivering they were dropping off food, and I was getting supermarket orders. So I was able to make nice breakfast. I was making it because I had a little fridge. I could make overnight oats. I was making chia pudding. I had some granola and yogurt and berries. So I was able to have quite nice breakfast. And interestingly, I found because I wasn't expending much energy, I only really needed 2 meals a day. I just wasn't getting that hungry. So I would have a late breakfast and then normally just needed another meal sort of early evening and a few snacks. So it was interesting. I was trying to work out every day. I could just about roll a mat out, and I had my hand weights delivered, so I was able to do a little bit of exercise. But I just didn't really get hungry. It was odd. And also alcohol was banned, actually. Weren't allowed to have any alcohol, so there wasn't that temptation. Probably a good thing, actually.
Yes, but I think what struck me when I was watching you is thinking, my goodness, you know, a lot of people, when we do go back into offices and things, spend an awful lot of money on non-nutritious lunches just for convenience. But what really struck me, I was thinking, wow, Sam, you have a bunch of food that you know you can travel with, or just make something nice out of: avocados, oat cakes, if you know, and stuff that we can just bung in a bag and give
I call it
ourselves.
assembling. You can just assemble nice meals, because I couldn't cook anything. I just had a mini fridge, and I did have a chopping mat and, you know, a knife, and that was about it. But there's lots of things that you can just assemble if you've got nice ingredients. Nice ingredients, you can just put them on a plate and make something really nice. You know, you can easily make a salad dressing. And I was actually quite impressed how varied I managed to sort of make my eating over the course of those 2 weeks, but I had quite a lot of time to think about it. But it was actually fine. After 2 weeks, I was definitely ready to leave, and I was looking forward to a nice cooked meal, I must admit.
And a glass of champagne.
And a glass of champagne, which was the first thing, because people are saying, oh, what's the first thing you're going to eat when you get out of quarantine? I said, no, it's the first thing I'm going to drink when I get out of quarantine. And that was a glass of champagne, which was the best glass of champagne I've ever had. So, it was a really interesting experience. It did make me realize how far I've come in terms of my food journey, if you want to call it that. And everything that I've learned really helped me to sustain myself in those 2 weeks and stay healthy. And I got into a really healthy routine. I was having a healthy breakfast. I was doing my little workout. I was then doing a little bit of work, and I sort of found that structure really, really helped me. And I wouldn't have wanted to do longer than 2 weeks. If someone had said to me, you've now got to do another week, I think I would have lost the plot. But it was manageable, but it's a mental game, really.
It really is, isn't it? So for our congregation, what would you say a good day's intake of food would look like? If we're not looking to lose weight, that would just, you know, because here's what I would do, because I know that I'm doing some of your smoked mackerel pate at lunch, actually, with a salad and with some oat cakes, and I did your carrot cake porridge for breakfast, which was lovely. And what I love about your porridge recipes, they're so flavoursome, like you grate apples or grate carrots and stuff. I actually always make a double portion, and I stick one in the fridge. So and then I have it the next day, and it's almost like a healthy rice pudding almost, you know. It's it
always improves, doesn't it? And I always say that if you make more and you stick it in the fridge, it's kind of like money in the bank.
It really
is. It's so great, because you've saved that little bit of time. And I mean, my fridge is always full of Tupperwares. Always. There's always something in there that I can just grab, because I always make more than I need. But in terms of if you're just talking about my normal food day, let's say, it sounds very similar to yours. So I've picked out 3 recipes that I make a lot of. So the first one, very similar to the carrot cake porridge, but in the Midlife method, it's the apple and carrot bircher. So it's an overnight oats. I make a big pot of it. It usually lasts about 3 days. And it's just, I've got the book here, that's what I'm looking at. So it's got red apple, grated carrot, oats, semi-skim milk or another milk if you don't do dairy, raisins, some cinnamon, a few seeds and a pinch of salt. And you just mix that all up, shove it in a Tupperware, stick it in the fridge. It's delicious.
It is delicious.
And it's, you know, if you've got that in the fridge, it's just as quick as opening a box of cereal.
It really is. You just bung it together and then you get up in the morning and it's really, really lovely.
And that's perfectly balanced. It's got some really good carbs in there. It's got protein, and it's going to sustain you, which I think is what you want from a breakfast. So that would be a very typical breakfast for me. For lunch, so interestingly today I made not smoked mackerel pate, but I made smoked salmon. So it's hot smoked salmon, and I made that into a pate, and I had that as a salad bowl with a couple of little crackers with it. So again, that would be a very typical lunch for me. Or quite often I have a soup, because I can make it in advance. And I can stick it in the fridge. And I'm a real soup nut. So one of my favorite ones is the Broccolino soup, which is basically broccoli and pecorino cheese. Or parmesan. And that's the basis. I love that one.
I've got some broccoli in. That's going to be this week. I love your leek chickpea and parmesan soup.
Again, I love cheese in the soup. And people say, oh, but it's supposed to be a weight loss book. You can totally have cheese. It's just all about proportions and how you use it, and using cheese more as a seasoning than like the main event. So it's not, you don't have to not eat certain things because maybe you associate them with being fattening or all that kind of language. There is room to eat everything as long as you're kind of eating it in the right proportions. So that would be a typical lunch. And then for dinner, my daughter's a pescatarian, so we do eat a lot of seafood. I mean, we do eat meat as well. There are plenty of meat recipes, but as a family, we tend to eat seafood or vegetarian. And one of the go-to ones is the teriyaki mackerel with sesame spinach.
Love that one.
So it's mackerel grilled in the oven with this teriyaki marinade. You wilt down a whole ton of spinach, you toss in a bit of sesame oil, put some toasted sesame seeds on the top, and that's it. And if I was on a day where I'm trying to watch the calories a bit, I would just have that. But if I was on a day which is just a normal day, I'd probably have it with some brown basmati rice or something like that. So
my boys love that. My boys.
So you can tweak it depending on, so just eating in tune with your appetite. Sometimes I'm just not as hungry. Sometimes I'm more hungry. So I tend to sort of just see how I'm going. So that's a very typical day. Again, if I'm watching the calories, I probably wouldn't have any snacks and I probably wouldn't have any alcohol. But if it's a normal day, I probably would have a glass of wine, and I would probably have, I've got some ideas for healthy snacks as well. And one of the ones I absolutely love, and I've just made some more today, is dates stuffed with peanut butter or almond butter. And you just open the date, put the peanut butter in, put them in a Tupperware, freeze them, keep them in the freezer, and you can eat them from frozen, and they're all fudgy and delicious. And that would be a very typical, if I need that sweet fix, I'm just a bit pecking around 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you have a cup of tea and you need that sweet fix, that would be a very typical snack that I have. So it's all that kind of thing. It's not diet food. I don't think it would particularly strike you as low calorie food. It's tasty, it's flavorful, and there's lots going on there, lots of plant based foods, which are very good for your gut. So I try and bring in as many kind of plant-based foods as I can in a day. So
I hope that generous with your recipes. You're so generous with your recipes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. That's why I love your Instagram recipes, because if you've got a store cupboard full of stuff, we have our veg box delivery, and I've actually got an allotment, so I'm just
lucky you. Fantastic.
I know. And last year I inherited, so I've got 2 half plots. So one is vegetables, and I'm going to do a cut flowers plot this year, and then I inherited a fruit plot with asparagus last year.
Oh wow, so that is the dream. That is the dream.
Asparagus. It was delicious. And then
you're going to be messaging me saying, Sam, I've got a glut of this. What should I make with it?
What should I make? So we used to cut a bundle of asparagus for ourselves, and then cut, so we literally had half of the asparagus that we were cutting, and then whoever we were in the middle of lockdown last St George's Day, that's when asparagus season starts, late April. And so whoever we came across on the way home got the gift of the asparagus.
Amazing. Wow, that must have made their day.
It was so lovely. But you are really generous in your recipes. And that's why I love following you on Instagram, because for people who think, oh gosh, to commit to a recipe book initially, if they see a few of your recipes on Instagram and you share what you're eating through the day,
just try a few. I share them on Instagram, Life Kitchen, if you want to follow me on Instagram. And I have a blog, which is midlifemethod.co.uk, and I post, there are recipes from the book on there as well. So you can just give it a go and see if it floats your boat. And if you like that, then that might inspire you to get the book and do a bit more cooking from either of the books, actually.
Amazing. So Just as we're wrapping up, have you learnt lessons in lockdown? And if so, what are they? And what will you be thankful for this last year?
Oh, wow, blimey. I think all of us have learned a lot of lessons, haven't we?
Yeah.
I suppose the most obvious one is that we've all had to live in the moment much more.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to plan things. We haven't been able to get excited about things. And we've had to learn to really live in the moment. And that's something I was not good at all.
Yeah.
I was always, I'm a person who travels and I do a lot and I'm always moving around. And I don't mean living in the moment in terms of, sort of self-indulgence. It's not about massages and sort of living to the max and having all these incredible experiences. I don't mean about seizing the moment in that sense.
It's being fully present, isn't it?
It's about actually taking pleasure in the ordinary almost.
Yes. Yeah.
It's about learning to take pleasure in the ordinary and the everyday rather than always trying to make your life bigger and better and what am I doing next week, next month, whatever, that's going to be amazing. Just having that cup of coffee in the sun and actually enjoying it, just those ordinary moments and just being able to slow right down and just say, actually, it's just good to be here, and stop yourself almost and thinking too far ahead. So I think I've really got a lot better at that and just feel a lot more kind of content with living in the moment and not planning so much. So my diary, I'm actually quite protective of my diary now. I try not to plan too far out.
Yeah.
Because I find that's a really big pressure. So if somebody asks me to book something a month in advance, I mean, work things are a bit different because obviously you have to schedule work things in with people. But when we're talking about just other life aspects, just be a bit more spontaneous, be like, let's just see how we feel sort of when we get there kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that's been a big change for me. I think my second one would be about not taking our health for granted, because this is a pandemic. It's a pandemic. It's about a virus that is taking people's health, and people are dying from this virus.
Yeah.
I think if we don't come out of this pandemic valuing our health, then we've really learned nothing.
It's so true. Yeah.
And that ties into everything I was saying about please prioritize your health.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody around you will benefit, not just you, because you're going to be healthier, happier, and you're going to have a longer, healthier life. And you do it not just for yourself, but do it for all your loved ones as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose the last thing I would say is that maybe we all understand a bit more how important that human connection is.
Yeah.
Because we've been so starved of it, really, apart from Zoom connections, which in some ways has been a good thing, because I live in Singapore and all my friends and family are all over the world. So actually having got into this whole Zoom culture has been great from a certain perspective, because I've connected way more with my family in other parts of the world. And actually those bonds have got a lot stronger because of Zoom.
Yeah, for sure.
But in terms of my friendship connections, I live in Singapore, which is a very transient place. It's full of people who are going here and there for work or seeing families, and you're hardly ever in the same place for more than a week or two. But all of us have been in Singapore for over a year. And so all the friends that I have in Singapore, I've got to know a lot better. We've really relied on each other. We've become each other's support networks in a way that just would not have happened. And I think it's made all of us realise that actually having those stronger human connections is so valuable, and it's not something we should take for granted. And we should put a bit more time into it in the future. And I definitely will nurture those relationships more in the future. So I think those are my three lockdown lessons.
Brilliant lessons. Sam, thank you.